Today, you will learn what Ukrainians are like at work. Hi, I'm Monika Chutnik, and I help leaders learn how to lead their international and virtual teams. Together with my team in ETA Leadership and Culture, we make the change happen by means of training, coaching, or facilitation. This podcast, A Step Ahead, has been created for all who want to grow in such an international, remote environment, who want to grow as leaders, as HR, as change agents, and simply as humans. I will be delighted to know that you make progress at work in life. All recordings and materials are available at www.astepahead.pro. I wish you a sense of fun and discovery. Russian invasion on Ukraine has made many people flee abroad for safety or lose their jobs, and this circumstance actually creates an unexpected advantage for employers: access to new workforce in all kinds of professions. In my conversation with Hanna Yankina, an experienced recruiter working in Poland, mostly in IT sector, you will learn more. What working style you can expect from Ukrainian colleagues, what you can do to find them, to find great candidates, what you can do to ensure a great onboarding into your team, into your company, and also what you can do to ensure a great experience of working together with Ukrainians in your business. Listen to this conversation if you are in HR function, if you work as an employee manager, or if you work as a business owner who would be interested to both help and access a new talent pool. It seems that there are plenty of people from Ukraine in Europe, and it would be nice to know what you need to know before you employ a Ukrainian person. And I'm having Hanna Yankina with me, who will be able to share some first-hand information about that. Hanna, would you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. So I'm Hanna. I'm working in recruitment for 10 years already. I'm living in Poland now, but I have been living in 4 countries: in Germany, in Georgia, in Ukraine, and in Poland. And I will be glad to share some experience, how to deal with Ukrainians, how to find the best colleagues for you, for your organization, and how to support your new colleagues.
There is a saying which we both saw in the media: hiring a Ukrainian can almost not go wrong, which is amazing. I would like to know a little bit more.
Sure. There's, in the current days, their words can work under stress in CV of the Ukrainian worker or specialist is not just words. The majority of us, I would say, we really can deal with stress, especially after their war started. So let's discuss a bit the business as usual in the bomb shelters and how we can find a job here in Europe, how we can employ Ukrainians here in Europe. However, firstly, I would like to start with a small background of working culture in Ukraine and the evolution of it.
That's the case. I'm seeing actually Ukrainian working culture has been evolving dramatically over the last tens of years. And what does it look like? Where does it come from? Where is it now?
So I would like to split it into 3 different periods. The first one is the working culture before the USSR collapsed. So the plant-based economy is very different to something people in Europe got used to. And those people, this generation, they used to have so-called collective responsibility. And, collective responsibility means no one is responsible for something. There are a few hints how to deal with those who grew up in the time. So probably those people, they are not very initiative, but they still will be very open to do something that their manager, their boss told. They will try their best to do that in the best way they can, but please do not expect that they will think why they should do that. The good example was their books Brezhnev wrote. So there were thousands of copies in these editions, and no one read it. And after the USSR collapsed, I know those books were also transferred to Germany, to Dresden, and like people were thinking what to do with those books, because burning books is not the best idea in Germany. They still have them. They just put it underground. And those collection of books no one opened is a good example of something people used to do just because. The party told we need it, Komsomol told it will do.
Actually, the passivity was and adjusting to the group was the necessary condition for surviving, for living a decent life.
Yeah, that's true. And still, it's not that easy to overcome it. So probably you will face it dealing with people like 40 years plus that are even coming now to Europe and looking for a new life or a new job here. But this is something you can deal with. You just have to learn how, and you also can get some benefits of it as well, just to know how to do it.
That's actually something that we share here in the central part of Europe, Central Eastern Europe, as we all have been under the Russian influence, and we basically had to follow the same type of thinking. Myself, I am 40 plus, and I could be taken as a representative of such a generation, and I am certainly aware of the becoming similar to the group around you is the best way to survive. Basically, that's the logic. But times have changed, and they have changed not only in Poland, in here, but also they have changed in Ukraine intensely.
Exactly, and the first major changes were after the USSR collapsed and the private business were possible in Ukraine. And the interesting thing that
30 years ago, just to highlight.
Yeah, quite long time. The interesting point that the payback time of the private business in Ukraine is always faster, and the payback rate is always bigger than interpreters in Europe expect. So that means that those people that were able to have their own businesses after the USSR collapsed, they managed to do that not thanks to something, but despite of the entire environment was against. So they also were treating their employees as rather resources just to get the income and get this income very fast. That means that the majority of those people that used to have their businesses like 30, 20 years ago, they were not treating their employees as something they have to invest to. They didn't need their loyal employees because their level of unemployment was very high, and that was very easy to find someone else on this place, much more easier than to pay for education, for loyalty of those employees. And of course, it's also had a big impact on how those people behave. I mean, those employees, after few years, after 10, 15 years, behave, and what do they expect after coming to Europe? Sometimes they are looking for some, catches. Even if everything is going smoothly, they just cannot believe that it can be like that.
That it can be so
good,
transparent, so good, so official. I noticed this in Poland as well, that the people who come from Ukraine tend to be a little bit distrustful at the end, like checking, isn't there a trap which I might encounter? And then they feel really relieved to discover that there's a lot of transparency and honesty in employment, and really a lot of employee focus. And looking at the background where they came from, it seems to be very just. But I also believe that this generation of people from Ukraine would be expecting quite a strong and dominant leadership. Isn't it the case?
Yeah, as well. So both of those generation, people 40 plus and people sometimes 30 plus, they need the strong leadership, I would say, at least at the beginning of their journey in Europe. And also they need very clear instructions, what to do, how to do. And we should remember that things that seems obvious to us sometimes seems completely unexpected, unusual for our new colleagues, not only from Ukraine, but, from any other country.
Absolutely.
And also, the last generation Z is also different. So those people, those young people, they are not that different as people in Europe, I would say. They used to travel a lot. They used to have the access to the free media, and they treat those European values as something very important, very, meaningful for them. Dealing with young people, especially young and educated people from Ukraine, I think that's not a big challenge. That's rather would be easy and pleasant.
Actually, most of these people who you recruit in the IT environment are coming from this generation.
I wouldn't say so.
No?
Not really. Yeah, that's not the majority of them. Yeah, we do have young candidates, young colleagues, but that's definitely not the majority of our colleagues.
I'm hearing about Ukrainians as hardworking, as people who need a lot of clarity about what needs to be done, very dedicated to work, and I'm also seeing and meeting plenty of incredibly educated people who speak several languages. That's my good luck in life to be meeting such people here around.
I think that the good example is the recruitment process in Google. So in Google, they have 3 stages of recruitment. The first, recruitment of IT specialists. The first 2 of them are for only technical questions and technical interviews. And the majority of Ukrainian engineers can brilliantly, or at least somehow, pass those interviews. And the last stage, which is about soft skills and communications ability, is a challenge for those. So you also can face hiring Ukrainians and dealing with Ukrainians. You can face some issues with communication, but still they can be very good technical specialists. And they can do better. They can be better in appropriate environment. So if you will make this atmosphere in a team of very open communication, you should expect the changes quite soon.
This seems like a lot of changes and a very rapid evolution of the approaches to work and life. How do these contrasting values really function in one society?
And that's an interesting point. And the bigger changes started after the war started, basically. The war started in 2014 when the Russia attacked Donetsk and Lugansk. And that was the first year, the first days, Ukrainians started so clearly understand that they are different and they don't want to have this Soviet flavor. But it's not that easy because the influence of Soviet culture was very strong. And, more than 75 years we were under that influence. So it's not that easy to overcome it. But their spirit of changes is very strong right now. And still, many people have this combination of their plant-based economy past and European future. And that's an interesting combination, and we also can deal with it.
Are there any significant differences between white and blue collars when we think about employing people from Ukraine? There are various sectors and they might be interested in various types of employees.
Yeah, that's the good question, and the difference between blue collars and white collars is, I think, much higher than, for example, in Poland, and even higher than in Germany. Clearly, it depends on the economy of the country, and the richer the country is, the less difference. We don't have the big middle class in Ukraine yet. Society is working on it, the government is working on it, but it's also not easy task. And those blue collars, those people who are not well educated, they are much more poor than people in Europe, and their level of life is completely different. So majority of those have never been on the seaside, for example, have never, like, the traveling for them is something from completely another universe, so on. And you must be prepared that if you are having Ukrainian blue collars, that they are simply, let's say,
More like simple people who might be actually encountering many more cultural challenges and also challenges to adapt. As what I heard from you is that you were in your first international exchange at the age of 10. That's quite amazing. I believe that many people from Western Europe haven't had this experience. So this shows how open to the world you are as a representative of the younger generation. But if people from the blue collar area have not been able to travel, not even to the seaside, not to mention any international exchange, their flexibility might need being taken care of at workplace.
Yeah, I think my family is a good example, because I wouldn't say that we were rich. I even would say that we were middle class when I was 10, but traveling abroad for me was the biggest priority for my parents. So that was something they were ready to collect money and to pay for.
Okay. So how does the situation look like currently? We know there is war in Ukraine. We hear various news in TV, on the radio, and wonder how it really works. There are certainly many people who have fled the invaded country and are looking for their safety in some other countries in Europe. There are many who have stayed. How does it function now? How does it really operate?
So first of all, we shouldn't forget that men are not allowed to leave Ukraine. And of course, that is very important when we are discussing the labor market. If we are talking about IT, the majority of IT workers are still male in Ukraine, and most of them stay in Ukraine. I also knew many colleagues that moved to Ukraine after the war started because they wanted to defend the country. So they moved out of Poland, of United States and other countries when the war started. And those women with children that moved out of Ukraine after the war started, you should understand that those families are splitted. Their husbands stay in Ukraine, and you can imagine the level of stress when you are in such situation. It's very hard to start building the new life because you don't know what's going to be next. When the war started, we all were thinking that it will take 2-3 weeks and those people will be back to their homes, but their homes destroyed, and many of them have just no place to come back and no clear vision of what's going to be next.
So one important thing that we need to understand about the people from Ukraine who are currently in Europe is that mostly of them are women, and many of them might be women with kids. When it comes to reflecting what they need in life, what they search for in life, that's a very important piece of information.
Yeah, exactly. And also the other thing we should think about is a remote job for Ukrainians. So many men out of hotspots in Ukraine, they moved to the western part of the country, and they are relatively safe. And some of them lost their job and they need this job, and they can perform very good because they are super motivated right now. And for the current moment, I do have plenty of colleagues staying in Ukraine. Basically, not only men, but also women that's due to some circumstances were not able to move out. I even do have, so some of my team members are staying in Kharkov, and we have the stand-ups, we have those meetings when I hear the alarm, and I'm thinking, okay, there is an alarm, you should go to the bomb shelter, and they're, okay, no worries, I will just continue doing my job. And they can perform as they used to perform before, and that's just incredible.
That really expands our thinking about employing people from Ukraine. It's not only the people who are physically in some countries with their families or kids, but also people who are available in Ukraine, available to work remotely. What about English or some foreign languages? What's the most popular language to learn when it comes to foreign languages in Ukraine?
I wouldn't say that the level of English for all the domains of business is the same. Of course, people in IT, they do speak English, like financial, logistics, a bit less, but still as well. And I understand that English is sometimes is the only way to find the remote job, but you easily can find specialists in Ukraine with good English and that are super motivated.
If we want to look for well-qualified candidates from Ukraine, let's imagine this scenario first. Where to look? Would you have any recommendations?
Mm-hmm. So if we are talking about IT and if we are talking about remote job for Ukrainians in IT, there are plenty of job portals. We will prepare the list, I believe, and share with our listeners. And you can also use Facebook and LinkedIn as usual. So I wouldn't say that something had changed after the war started. When it comes to non-IT professions, there were made some job portals as remote job for Ukraine, and there you can find specialists within financial domain, logistics, and so on. Also, you can use Ukrainian job portals. They're very cheap. You should pay for, you have to pay, for each vacancy, but it's much more cheaper than in Europe. And they are quite popular. And of course, you also can use the social media.
Mm-hmm. So I will share later the precise link where to find all the websites which you recommend with the speakers at the end of the recording today.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And when it comes to hiring people that are in Europe, it's probably a little bit more challenging task. Yet, like as we all know, many of Ukrainians are staying in Poland and they stay in here not because they want, they just don't know how to go further. What should they do? They're just afraid. And as you can imagine, those blue collars, especially that have never been traveled, the first time abroad for them, and some of them lost their houses, sometimes lost their family members, and they are stressed, they are afraid, and helping them to understand that you can offer their shelter, you can offer the job in other countries than Poland, and you can explain them how can they go to like Germany, I don't know, Great Britain, whatever. Just give the clear instructions and they will eager to do that. So I saw dozens of questions in Facebook from Ukrainian refugees, how we can go further, how we can go in other countries than Poland. And, these discussions is like a little bit infant. So people that have never been traveled, they sometimes have questions like the small children do.
which makes me think that when you look for an employee and you would really like to either help and and get the business impact, you should really be quite detailed with instructions, with information about the job offer, with being very specific, extremely transparent, maybe extremely detailed about what you offer, what are the conditions, what you don't offer also, so that the people don't have false expectations, but also so that the people feel safe to go. I just was talking to one woman today. They were living in Poland for 2 months now, and they have decided to go to Spain due to the very same reason that you mentioned. They namely found a job easier in Spain, and it's not a surprise as we are having 2 million Ukrainians in Poland currently. So the job market is a little bit overflown, if we may put it this way. The possibility to tap into a skilled workforce and help Ukrainians as well to find a peaceful place and a good job is opening up. Do you have any statistics about Ukrainians in general?
I mean, in Poland or generally?
Any numbers that you would be able to share?
5 million of Ukrainians are already in Europe, and it is said that about 3 million of them will remain longer than the war lasts.
About 3 million might stay longer if they establish new roads, if they find a new safe haven, and so on. Haven, yes, if they find a new safe haven, and so on. I also was going across some statistics. I think they were saying 60% of the people from Ukraine, I mean the newest wave, the last since the war in Ukraine started now, were with kids, but it tells us also that the 40% of them are not with kids, yes, so they are single or maybe older in terms of their family situation. And yes, indeed, I also have seen quite a few cases of people returning to Ukraine for various reasons, including those that you mentioned before. Let's assume a company has employed a person from Ukraine. Now, how to take care about good onboarding so that this person really gets on board and starts performing as soon as possible? Basically, that's what we want from any employee.
First of all that I mentioned with those difficulties of traveling doesn't mean that those people cannot perform on the highest level on their factories, on their working places. You will, I think you will be surprised on how good many of them can perform as workers. I mean, the blue collar workers, especially. If you will invest in this explanation how to start, you will get the good benefits after. Their expectation of majority of those people are quite low, so they don't need a very good accommodation, they don't need very high salaries, and they can perform quite good. When it comes to onboarding, as well as this recruitment processes, I mean, not recruitment, but pre-onboarding, with traveling, with accommodation. People also need instructions, and they also need to be, get all the explanation that seems sometimes for us very obvious, but not for them. And I would advise to ask questions if everything is clear, as much as you can. And of course, Ukrainians are a bit more, let's say, from high context culture. That means that sometimes they will say yes, even if they don't understand. So in the very beginning, if you ask the question, if everything is clear, ask also to paraphrase and to be sure just that your new colleagues understood it the way you wanted them to understand that.
That's a very fair example. So you're saying it's just to ask a potential new employee or the actual new employee from Ukraine to say, okay, so please tell me how you have understood that so that we are clear and make it very explicit. That's what I think makes it comfortable. What I'm thinking also about the job offers, if we go just one step behind, I'm thinking it would be worthwhile to make it explicit whether the company is offering to cover the train ticket or the flight ticket, depending on where the candidate is and where the job offer is. And one more thing that I'm considering is that actually I'm impressed how well networked people in Ukraine are. I mean, everybody knows somebody else. And if you are looking for a number of employees, then maybe the best strategy, what do you think, Hanna? Instead of looking for 10 individual candidates, you can find one which seems to be the most relevant and ask this person for recommendation. How would you react to this?
Some advantages and disadvantages in this, because on the one hand, yeah, that's true. And such employee can recommend very good colleagues, but please also remember that such employee may try to recommend his or her brother, I don't know, brother, sister, friend, and so on, just to recommend someone he or she would like to work with, but not the best employee you're looking for.
So double checking on qualifications does make sense, absolutely.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it double checking, but at least checking. Yeah.
What other tips would you have for people and companies who are about to employ people from Ukraine, or maybe who have just employed colleagues from Ukraine?
I know that not that many people in Europe speak Ukrainian, and more people speak Russian. And I know that's maybe kind of a problem nowadays, of course. So if you don't speak Ukrainian, but you speak Russian, I would advise you to learn just a few phrases in Ukrainian to greeting, I don't know, to how to say thank you, and how to say, I'm sorry, I speak only Russian, not Ukrainian, but I hope you will understand me. And trust me, you will not face any aggression, I don't know, anything against that.
As the best, the point is to be able to communicate with each other. And how does it sound? Can you actually quote the phrases, how to say hello, thank you in Ukrainian, and the last phrase which you said?
Доброго дня, я не дуже добре розмовляю українською мовою, але зможу допомогти вам з будь-яким питанням. So it's like, hello, I'm not speaking Ukrainian very well, but we'll be glad to help you with any question.
And it doesn't sound to be extremely complicated, especially if anybody had been learning Russian.
Come on, we can learn a few phrases in any language.
Absolutely. Even in Chinese, I managed
exactly.
to do it. Yeah. Yes. Okay, very good. So anything else, Hanna, just to check with you?
So also remember that those people that move to Europe, they also need some support in looking for kindergarten and looking for, I don't know, hairdressers, something that is clear as well, clear for you, for your daily routine. But some of them will just hesitate to ask. And if you will prepare the list of services in your city, it will be the good idea. Also, Ukrainian women, they use those beauty services very often. And, this is like must have for majority of those women. And I think that it would be very nice if you can just at least prepare some advices how to find and how to, call and ask for some services.
That's actually true. I might have told you that as a company, we're hosting a Ukrainian mom and her daughter in the office. And one of the first questions that she asked was, where do I find a nail service? And I was laughing, but she showed me her nails. She has those nails that you need to remove after a certain time because otherwise they break. I fully understand that. And my problem was that I wasn't able to help. But as I don't have such, but I was able to redirect her to some other things. And these are simple questions like, which are the holidays, when are the shops closed or open. For example, in Poland, shops are closed on Sunday, and that's not a habit in Ukraine, might be surprising. Or maybe, where do I find a dry cleaner? Like the most simple, frequently asked questions. I believe as a company, you can do a 2-page frequently asked questions, so like living in Brussels, frequently asked questions, and redirecting people, and you can get it translated easily by Google Translate. It doesn't cost anything, so it seems not to be that difficult.
Yeah, and you also can make kind of portal where your employees can ask questions, and I would advise to make it, visible for everyone, and explaining how to use it. If you are hiring people that do not have their account in, the computer, their email, they don't need it. So just make a, WhatsApp conversation, Viber conversation. People in Ukraine use Telegram as a messenger as well. It's very popular. And if you have any colleagues local colleagues that speak Ukrainian or Russian, that's a good idea to ask him or her to support, probably offer some bonuses for that, and it will make their life much easier.
It seems to be very approachable, in the sense it's not a rocket science thing. It seems to be very sensible, and it seems to be very manageable in terms of employing people from Ukraine.
Yeah, it's almost for free, and it's very helpful. The other thing is about medical insurance. So in most of the companies in Europe, the medical insurance is something each employee has, but it's still something Ukrainians do not expect, and explain how can they use this insurance is very important. So I know many examples of people, even in IT, so well-educated people with good level of English, that totally cannot understand how their medical system in Poland. To be honest, it took me also a few years to understand how can I use their public medical help.
I need to be honest that I'm also not completely in line. I just keep on asking whenever I need anything. I just call somebody and ask the other people how they have managed. I think that medical system in Poland is a special case in itself. Okay, and maybe I can just ask you, when you moved into Poland, when you started working there, what actually surprised you? What did you experience yourself?
If we are talking about the working culture, my biggest surprise and my first surprise was on my first working place. I was a recruiter in the recruitment agency, and typically we were getting the success fee only. And my colleague, she was very motivated about recruitment of the specialist. She spent, 3 weeks on looking for him. And then she invited him for the interview, started at 3:30. And he was a bit late. He wrote that, I'm sorry, but I need 15 minutes more. Okay. And the interview started at 45 minutes exactly. And when her working day was over, she just told, okay, I'm sorry, my working day is over. We will continue tomorrow. And she just closed her laptop and went to the tram station because her working day was over. For me, as for someone who grew up in Ukraine, it was just I really saw that. It was just impossible. So the work-life balance is not something Ukraine can be proud of, to be honest. But it's maybe good for some cases.
I see your point. And it's also maybe the approach to time, a little bit more relaxed in Ukraine, not being very sharp on when to end the meeting, when to end the conversation, because I have the next one in a row. That's something that I believe we as Polish people are learning in the international business. And I'm quite convinced that Ukrainians are learning that too.
It depends. I would say that if we're talking about IT, the IT in Ukraine was started as outsourcing for companies in the United States. So the kind of American management is more common for Ukrainian business. And people used to, over time, they used to work a bit longer, even every day. I wouldn't say that, it's kind of like in Eastern countries that specialists cannot go out of the office till his or her boss is sitting. No, it's not like that. But people just, for example, their lunch time is not counted in their working time, and the typical working day in Ukraine is 9 hours, not 8 hours. And that is something expected for most of Ukrainian employees here as well.
How would you like to conclude the conversation today?
Hire Ukrainians, you almost can go wrong. If you want to support Ukraine, it's not something you can do with donating money. It's much more better offering the job for people that can work, want to work, and can perform great. Also, offering the remote job to Ukrainians is also making an impact in Ukrainian economy and Ukrainian renovation during and after the war. And also, that is not, there's not a charity. There's something you can get many benefits out, and you can get very loyal employees, those who will remember for a very long time what you have done during the war. But if we are talking about people here in Europe, you will be surprised how loyal people from Ukraine can be, how grateful they can be for any support you provide. Of course, you can face some cases with, not the best people, not the best colleagues, but do not
generalize.
Yeah, do not generalize. So if you will face such situation, just go over and try again, and you will get the benefits.
Thank you very much for the conversation, Hanna.
Thank you as well. Thanks.
3 things that I'm taking away as key messages from this conversation is: give clear instructions to newcomers. Double checking for understanding might be the best thing to avoid confusion. The second one would be learn a small phrase in Ukrainian to make the first step. It's really a heartwarming experience to hear somebody speaking a language. Even just a few words is very, very nice. Watch the general situation of your candidate and offer information on a broader level. In fact, it's not only a work situation, but it's also a life circumstance. So you taking it into consideration might bring additional value to your candidates, to your new employees. I also have a big request to you. If you know a person who is considering working with Ukrainians, or who is employing Ukrainians, or who is about to search for candidates from Ukraine, please share this podcast episode with them so that they can get additional information, additional insight into the cooperation with Ukrainians. I am actually making my first steps here with this podcast in English. I have been recording a podcast for 3 years now, but that one was in Polish and still is in Polish. By the way, okrokdoprzodu.pl is the website if you like to find it, if you're a Polish speaker. But if you are not, or whether you are, I'm very happy to get some feedback from you. It's very important for me now in these initial steps. So I'm very happy if you can give me a thumb up, if you can find me on LinkedIn. Maybe you can find the podcast profile A Step Ahead by Monika Chutnik, and you can leave your comment there. You can leave your reflection there. I usually manage to get involved with all the people who share comments. It's so important for a podcaster to have this feedback, this mutual exchange of impressions, of conversation with the listeners. And I'm also very happy if you leave a comment on Spotify or on any platform that you listen this podcast on, maybe on YouTube. Talk to you next time.